A very warm welcome to one and all here at the Buddhist Mahavihara's Facebook page. We are going live this evening from the Buddhist Mahavihara's Facebook page. And this evening we have with us a new guest, and this Bhante is appearing on our Dhamma sharing for the first time. We have with us Bhante Joe Atulo, who's actually from Canada but currently residing in Sri Lanka. Bante is actually right now, spending some time at a hermitage in Sri Lanka. So what we have done is actually because of the poor internet connectivity in Sri Lanka, we have actually pre-recorded his Dhamma sermon. But Bante is with us now live, and let me just introduce Bante.
Hi there.
Welcome, Bante Joe. Hello.
Yeah,
Hi.
nice to be here.
Good evening. Yes.
Good evening.
For those of you who are tuned in, let me just read Bante's profile. Now, Bhante Joe Atulo was born in London, Ontario in 1983. He was ordained at the Sarana Monastery in Perth, Ontario in 2010. He completed his novitiate at the Tisarana Monastery with the exception of 1 year where he spent away in Thailand. The following this, Bhante spent about 3.5 years living in the Greater Toronto area. And last year, Bhante traveled to Sri Lanka and is currently living at the Baddaka Vihari Aranya outside the village of Tanjantena in Sri Lanka. So welcome, Bhante. And as I told our listeners earlier, we will do a pre-recorded session with you, and then we will bring you back on to do the live Q&A with regards to your topic tonight, which is entitled Planting the Seed. Bhante, would you like to say something to our audience before we start?
Just hope that the talk might be useful, and if anybody has any questions that come up after the talk, then Leslie's got it all arranged, and I'll be back here to try to answer your questions. So hope that everybody has a great evening, and before long can plan to meet again.
Thank you, Bhante. So we will start with tonight's sermon, and the title, as I mentioned, it's called Planting the Seed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here at the ruins of Endagala actually, which is a kind of apparently was the resting place of an ancient king in Sri Lanka. And there's this there was a request from Leslie from the Buddhist Mahavihara in Malaysia to record a talk, and so thought to record a short talk for that group, maybe about 20 to 25 minutes. And didn't have any particular topic in mind, so I'll just kind of wing it, or I guess, and see what comes up. So, so for kind of for a Buddhist practitioner, there's many different kind of modes of practice that one can do, and kind of by modes I mean there's many aspects to a person's practice. There's kind of dana, there's sila, there's bhavana. These are the three classics. And then there's also kind of ways that people practice in general. People sometimes practice chanting. You know, sometimes people will study explicitly the stutas. Sometimes people will study the Abhidhamma. Sometimes people will study the commentaries or the Atthakatha. And as far as bhavana goes, there's people who like to do samatha. There's people who like to do vipassana. There's people who like to do a mix of both. There's people who like particular topics. Some people like asubha as a topic. Some people like the breath as a topic. And so there's all these different ways that one can approach one's Buddhist practice, that one can approach one's kind of entrance into the Dhamma and one's growing in the Dhamma. The thing about all these approaches is that in Buddhism, basically all of them, like the scientific term for them is they're teleological. In other words, they're aimed at an end. And it's kind of the Buddha's aim in doing his teachings wasn't to describe reality out there. This is one of the differences between Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy, or Western philosophy is in European philosophy and Indian philosophy. So apparently what I'd read, and there may be people out there who are experts who could who know a bit more, but that philosophy in the West was kind of centered around the I. In other words, are the things that we're looking at real or not, and kind of what's really out there? You know, what is it? What is the reality of the world? And philosophy in India, at least, from what I heard, was concerned with actually the mouth. It's kind of in terms of trying to find a source of food. What is it that will give us a permanent source of food? So all beings need to eat. And so for this reason, the Buddha describes, I mean, partially for this reason, the Buddha's teachings are aimed at an end. They're kind of within, they're part of this kind of Indian group of thought. His teachings would fit into this kind of general thrust in Indian society in that way, which is that they're aimed at finding a permanent source of happiness. And so the aim of the Buddha's teachings isn't to become a really great scholar. It isn't to become a really great chanter. And it isn't even to become a really great meditator in terms of achieving psychic powers or the jhanas or anything like that. Its purpose is aimed at the destruction of the taints. And all of these kind of, all of his teachings have that end. So there's kind of suttas, which probably people are pretty familiar with, the sutta of the heartwood, you know, where people go out, you know, a monk goes out, he gains offerings and fame, he gets jhanas, he gets psychic powers, and the Buddha compares these various things to like the leaves and branches, to the outer bark, the inner bark, and the heartwood of the tree. There might be some more there, I can't remember that sutta exactly. But in any event, these kind of various things are like that. They're all kind of, you know, parts of the Dhamma, but the heartwood of the Dhamma is Nibbana. So it can be kind of a little bit confusing, especially in the modern era, when apparently one thing that happened was when Britain was conquered Lower Burma, and then went to Upper Burma to conquer Upper Burma. And the king at the time was a Buddhist king. His name was King Mindon. And his response to the British invasion was mainly, at least in Lower Burma, to shore up his rule, to do different things, but also as an act of making merit, was mainly to purify the Sangha and try to make Buddhism very strong in his country. But one of the things that really impressed, apparently, the Burmese, this is one of the things that I've heard, and again, people may correct me on this, but was that because of this British invasion, the British were able to overtake the Burmese army with a lot of technology. And so meditation was actually influenced by, say, Western methods of production to a certain extent. So after the British invasion is when these kind of very strict meditation methods came out. We do step A, step B, step C, step D, step E, step F, step G, and we arrive at Nibbana. It's kind of, you know, if we standardize, the British were able to produce quite a lot of technology, you know, mass produce weapons, mass produce vehicles, mass produce all these things by standardizing all these various steps in a process of manufacture. And in that way they could come up with these really great outputs. And so this was an influence that happened in Burma, possibly, what I've heard, and seems to make sense at the time, which influenced the approach to meditation. So this is one thing, now that in the modern world, there's a very popular, at least in the West, I'm not sure everywhere, it's very popular to have a very specific set of techniques that one does, and that should bring kind of exact results every time. There's also a kind of an approach through study where people will take up the study of the Buddha's teachings, try to learn his texts very thoroughly, and try to learn the Pali Canon very thoroughly. Some people try to learn the Abhidhamma very thoroughly, all these various things. And there's sometimes courses of studies that go through, you know, huge numbers of suttas or huge amounts of Abhidhamma, all these different things, which of course is, you know, quite beneficial. I mean, the Buddha's teachings are there to be studied. They're there and can be studied to develop right view. But one of the things, and there's also other practices too, say like the practice of dana, kind of where people offer food, offer various things, try to help people do these different things. All of these various practices, though, if they're kind of taken on as an end into themselves, if they're taken on without reference to the end aim of the Buddhist teachings, without reference to the aim of eliminating defilements, without reference to Nibbana, then these kind of teachings they can actually be things that can go a bit too far. They can be things that are grabbed the wrong way. So the Buddha uses this simile of the snake, kind of grab his teachings. You grab the snake by the head, you're not in danger, but if you grab the snake by the tail, it turns around and bites you. So in that sutta, he was specifically referring to people who grab the tail of the snake and kind of grab his teachings and try to use them for debate and these various things. But also if we grab, say, knowledge of study and try to use that to, gain knowledge and think that that knowledge is a representation of attainment in Buddhist practice. It's a good thing to have a lot of knowledge, but if it doesn't lead to the ending of defilements, then it's knowledge that hasn't become so useful. It's like somebody who's grabbed the snake at the wrong part. It can turn around and bite them. Some people actually sometimes even become arrogant because of their knowledge. Or it can be the case that somebody practices a lot of meditation and using these specific methods, the kind of going through things step by step and completes a course or completes a training program or something like that. And as a result, they become arrogant or they become conceited. And that kind of grabbing on, not just arrogance or conceit, but that kind of grabbing onto this technique, taking it too far, is something that may not necessarily lead to good results. It can also be the case that with other things, like say if somebody practices dana a lot, but then doesn't keep sila, doesn't keep all these other various aspects of the Buddhist teachings, then it can become something that obscures the other aspects of the Buddhist path that one needs to put together to gain the genuine results. So in all these various modes, what the Buddha kind of tends to describe is that these things come together. Kind of dana, sila, bhavana, they all join. And they're kind of things that kind of encourage each other. They're things that kind of lead to strengthening of one another, like a positive feedback loop. So actually just in this field out here, there's kind of a lot of rice planting that's being done right now. And so if somebody plants rice and they have good soil, then they have a lot of sun, they have a lot of rain, then all those three things come together and they help this seed grow. They help this seed grow into a kind of plant that one can eventually eat and use to nourish oneself. And in the same way, if one takes all these aspects together, not just to the exclusion of one another, but one takes study, one takes meditation, one takes sila and dana, and puts all of them together, it's like having this kind of good sun, good soil, and good rain. And that helps this seed of our intention to achieve the end of our suffering, grow. It helps this kind of thing grow. The other important aspect about this kind of metaphor of a kind of seed growing and being planted in a field is that the Buddhist teachings, advancing in them isn't something that we can necessarily plan out. So if it was possible to achieve Nibbana just by doing a very specific set of instructions every time, then that specific set of instructions would be in the canon. The Buddha would have taught it, and it would be something that consistently produced these results for whoever did it. And similarly, if it was the case that studying all the time would lead one to Nibbana in and of itself, just pure knowledge of the suttas in and of themselves would lead one to Nibbana, then many kind of university professors or all these various people or different things would be arhants. But it doesn't seem to be the case that that's happening in that same way. And similarly, if just sila alone was enough, then just these people who kept all the 5 precepts, these various things, they would be achieving the paths and fruits in and of that. And there would be many people in many religions who do that. That's not exclusive to Buddhism. But the thing about the Buddhist teachings is that similar to this field, similar to the way that a farmer grows a plant, he or she watches it mature, he or she observes the conditions and adjusts them as needed, depending on how the plant looks, depending how much water came today, depending how the soil looks, was there a flood, how are things looking. One adjusts them and watches the plant to make sure it's growing well. In the same way, one uses these various techniques and adjusts them. One watches them, am I doing too much studying now? How is my meditation going? Am I keeping sila very strictly? And the thing that one's watching here, this seed that one is watching grow, is basically the wholesome qualities that arise in one's mind. As this is the thing about the Buddhist teachings, they're basically a path which describes what to take on as wholesome, what to abandon as unwholesome. So one can evaluate if the seed is growing well, if one reads what's in the canon, and then one can do what's in the canon too. If one reads what's in the canon but can't do it, then this means that the seed isn't growing properly. It's not growing in the right way. So can one keep the 5 precepts perfectly? Can one keep the 8 precepts on Uposatha days? Can one practice meditation? Can one achieve the jhanas? All these various things. Is one developing insight that separates one's mind from the world? Can one practice renunciation? Can one live the way that the Buddha prescribed for lay people if they're lay people, for a monk if they're a monk? And this isn't just like a kind of person who's judging or scolding, like, okay, live this way or else. What is it? It's more like a farmer who's watching the seed to make sure that it grows well, because they want to eat the fruit of that seed. And so basically when one evaluates one's practice, one evaluates how it's going, one evaluates in this way: am I able to do these things? Am I growing in wholesome qualities? Are these wholesome qualities in me increasing or decreasing? Am I gaining insight into phenomenon? And then one adjusts these various elements of one's practice and sees how it goes. This is where Buddhism becomes a little bit like a science, or, I guess maybe a bit more, even still like a farmer. This is the way a farmer develops skill. Some farmers can probably just, I have no idea what's going on in some of these rice fields. I've just kind of seen them recently. But some farmers probably just look at it and say, oh, there's enough rain here. The rice will grow well. Some farmers could probably look at a field and, know from looking at the field, oh, there's going to be a problem with water drainage here. And to me, it's all just a field, because I have no experience with that. But when one trains one's mind, looks for the ways that wholesome qualities increase, looks for the way that unwholesome qualities decrease, one develops a skill. This skill where one learns to adjust these conditions and gains this kind of more intuitive knowledge. And this is exactly what a skill, mainly in one of the main ways in which one can say that one has a skill, is one's ability to kind of put together things in situations that are often changing. Like a carpenter who can build a house, with different levels, different elevations, different schematics, using different woods and different materials and different tools. It's kind of very different than somebody who takes a piece of IKEA furniture and just screws it in, follows step A, step B, step C, step D, step E. Because our mind is like this. It's kind of, there's conditions around the mind that are operating all the time. The conditions that make one happy, the conditions that make one sad, the conditions that are in one's job, the conditions that are in one's family, the conditions that are in one's past. All these things are different for different people, and they change quite frequently. The present becomes the past, the future will become the past, all these various things. And so for this reason, one needs to develop this dynamic skill, this skill of being able to evaluate how things are going in the mind and adjust it accordingly. So the Buddha says that, if one can't read the minds of others, one should be able to read one's own mind. And it's kind of just the way, not sure if it was the same sutta, but, that gives a simile of a cook, where a cook watches their kind of master to see, what did he like today? What did he like the next day? If he takes, a lot of spicy food, then give him more spicy food the next day. If he takes a lot of, salty food, then give him more salty food the next day. All these various things. And so in watching this, one learns what the kind of master likes. Get this here. And then one pleases the master. And in the same way, one kind of learns for oneself, is this meditation topic the right one for me? Is it the wrong one for me? It's different. It depends on the person. It's like a person liking sweet food, sour food, salty food. Is this kind of environment, this kind of where I practice, is this the right one for me or the wrong one for me? And it's different for everybody. And in the same way that one gets a reward when working well as a cook for one's boss, and one's boss kind of gives one a money reward, if one practices the Buddha's teachings well, then happiness is the reward for that. That's what one kind of reaps from practicing these things well. In a similar way that a farmer lets their kind of rice crop grow, adjusts it here and there, watches it here and there, they eat the fruit. When a person trains their mind well, then their mind ripens in happiness. Because ultimately this is what everybody is aiming for in basically everything that they do. And I kind of remember when I was a young man one time, and our teacher in 7th grade, I think it was, asked, well, what do you think the purpose of life is? And I thought about it for a while and put up my hand and said, I think the purpose of life is to be happy. And I said, oh, no, that's not it. The purpose of life is not to be happy. But that kind of answer actually made a lot of sense to me. It was kind of, what am I doing things for if it's not to be happy? That's the end aim of everything that I do. However misguided it might be, whatever the results of it might be, the end aim is to achieve kind of happiness. And in the same way, whatever somebody wants out of houses, whatever somebody wants out of cars, whatever somebody wants out of their family, whatever somebody wants out of status, whatever somebody wants out of kind of fame, all these various things, they have happiness at their end, as their end aim. They have happiness as what that person is aiming for. So this is one of the things that people turn to Buddhism for. Because after searching for a while for happiness in these various things, people sometimes realize they're only getting a little. And it doesn't last too long. Kind of lasts a certain amount of time. One gets a new car, one gets a new house, one gets a new job. One is happy for a little bit, but then after a while that happiness fades and one needs a better car or a better house or a better job to maintain that same level of happiness. And this is the thing about craving. This is the thing about desire, is that it's never something that can be satisfied. And kind of one trains one's mind to desire, that desire isn't ended through training one's mind to desire. It's not allayed through getting what one desires. Essentially what one's mind to do is to want more. And so it's only allayed, that desire is only kind of satisfied for a brief period of time. So it's for this reason that the Buddha instructs us basically to turn inwards, not to look for happiness in these kind of external things. All of his teachings tend to be aimed at the end of Nibbana, and the road to this end doesn't lead outwards necessarily. Doesn't lead outwards to building more buildings, doesn't lead outwards to more financial success, doesn't lead outwards to a better reputation. It leads inwards, and outwardly things fall away. Outwardly one's attachments fall away. Outwardly sometimes one's involvement with the world falls away as one turns more and more inwards. And when these things fall away, one learns to look for resources that are inside. The nice thing about the Buddhist teachings, one of the really great things about it, is that some of the resources that are inside people, some of the potentials for happiness that are inside people are much greater than the potentials for happiness that exist in the world at large. They're much greater than the potentials for happiness that exist in houses, in cars, in one's family, all these various things. Because these are kind of potentials that unless one practices, one doesn't get to experience. So I remember one time I was staying at a monastery, and at that monastery they have this kind of Q&A session where the lead teacher goes around and kind of like asks everybody in a circle, like, do you have a question? 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 And different lay people will come different days to this Q&A. And he kept going around the circle, and there was a woman there with her husband, and her child. And she seemed kind of upset when she asked her questions. She said, almost kind of like, pretty upset. She says, a mother's love for her child is supposed to be unconditional. But, the last time I was at the monastery, I experienced this kind of pure love, which, that was the word she used, which kind of dwarfed, I can't remember her exact words, but, outstripped basically anything that she feels for her child or her husband. Excuse me. And she felt quite guilty about that. She felt, like that shouldn't be the case. And she was a mother, she should have more love for her child and shouldn't be able to feel any types of happiness, I guess, or she used the word love, that were beyond that. But the thing about all these things that are external to us that we attach to is that they can obscure the potentials for happiness that are inside. So the Buddha uses this kind of, he describes this simile, so I kind of right now, actually in here there's this kind of canopy But out there's quite a lot of sun. It says kind of, the bhikkhus, the mind is radiant, which doesn't mean it's pure, it means it's radiant. But it's clouded by these kind of defilements that kind of come past. Kind of like the sun, my own kind of interjection, I guess, that the sun is clouded by, obscured by clouds. And so basically what this means is that there are potentials in the mind that are covered over by defilements in the mind, covered over by attachments in the mind. Like these kind of various trees, they form this canopy that string together. In the same way, sometimes one's attachment to money, attachment to cars, attachment to family, attachment to all these various things, they become like these kind of trees that grow up, and then the branches intertwine and form a canopy. And that canopy can seem like a safe place. It can seem like a place that might shelter one from the rain. But what it also does is it obscures the sun so that one can't see the kind of brightness that is outside this canopy. And so in a similar way, when one has all these various attachments externally, it can obscure one's potential for happiness internally. So the road that the Buddha teaches one to go down is one that leads in, one that leads away from external attachments, and one that leads to higher types of happiness. It's the kind of path that one goes down. So it's not a barren path. Right? So this is another way that one can judge if one's kind of practice is going well, if one's kind of rice plant is growing straight, if it's getting enough water, if it's getting enough sun, what needs to be adjusted, is that eventually this kind of practice leads to happiness. It wouldn't lead one to becoming more, neurotic or worse off. One will become kind of more peaceful generally and more calm generally, although there might be times when one suffers from having to give things up that were bad habits that one enjoyed before. So in this way, one can evaluate, am I on the right track? Am I on the right path? And this kind of evaluation is something that one knows directly. One doesn't need another person to tell one. It's like if a farmer plants this kind of rice plant, allows it to grow, it keeps growing, and then it bears fruit. When that farmer harvests the rice and eats it, then nobody can convince him, him or her, that his technique for planting rice, that didn't bear fruit. Might be some better ways or some more efficient ways, but that he's grown the rice well enough, he can eat it. He can satisfy his hunger. And in a similar way, the Buddha's teachings are aimed at this end. And kind of Western philosophy has this aim through the eye to discover what it is out there, what is the reality out there. But if we approach the Buddha's teachings through this means, that we're going to study them and learn all the suttas, by heart, and do all these things and get a complete picture of the Dhamma, then we can sometimes grab the tail of the snake and have it turn around and bite us. We can think that we know about the Buddha's teachings, but we may not really know. Because the knowledge of the Buddha's teachings, the true knowledge of them, is the knowledge of the lessening of defilements in one's mind, the gaining of wholesome qualities in one's mind, and the knowledge of the destruction of one's taints in one's mind. This is what makes one know what the Buddha taught about. And this is like the farmer kind of being able to eat the rice for himself. That's when his hunger is allayed. Because this is what Indian philosophy, I guess we were saying, was kind of aimed at, in general, kind of trying to find a permanent source of food. And actually the Buddha's teachings go beyond the need for a source of food, even beyond the need to eat entirely. And that happiness that comes from not having to have any external attachments, from not having the canopy overhead, from not having the sun obscured, from going beyond even pure and impure, that's a happiness that doesn't change. That's the happiness of Nibbana. And that's what people are looking for. This is the aim, the end aim, trying to find a permanent happiness of everything that one does. Whether it's getting a new house, or a new car, or having one's children get good grades, or having status, all of them have their aim as happiness. But true happiness is only to be found in this path. A true happiness that lasts, that's not subject to change, is only to be found when one turns away from external things. Because whatever is put together is bound to fall apart. It's a path that goes inwards. It's a path that leads onwards when one learns to observe one's wholesome qualities, to see if they're growing, observe one's unwholesome qualities to see if they're declining, and one learns to move inwards to try to find higher and higher levels of peace, until eventually one finds something that goes beyond conditions entirely. And this is the ending of the need to eat. This is Nibbana. And this is what we're looking for as Buddhists in our Buddhist practice.
So Bhante, we've come to now the Q&A part. You've just finished your Dhamma sharing with us. There are two questions. Can you hear me, Bhante?
Yes, I can.
Okay. This is one of the questions. Are you able to read that?
Yeah. So the world today is too materialistic. So much so people keep chasing materialism, thinking this is happiness. How to improve such a situation? Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and one that relates directly to the theme of the talk. And so one of the things about the world in Buddhist practice is that the world is contained within this fathom-long body. In other words, our world is something that we perceive, and it's something that we create. So in order to change the world, the thing that we do is we change ourselves. So although the external world may be something that's steeped in materialism, one's perception of the external world is something that one can control. So the more that one lessens one's own attachment to materialism, lessens one's own attachment to external sense pleasures, the more one tends to perceive other types of happiness. And this is the changing of the world for oneself. Because it's not really possible. Even the Buddha couldn't completely change the mind of everybody. He described himself, there was a sutta where a man said, will all of the world achieve Nibbana, or a third of the cosmos, or basically what percentage of the cosmos will achieve Nibbana? And the Buddha gave this simile of a man standing at a crossroads and said, if a person wanting to go to Rajagaha approached this man at the crossroads and asked which way to Rajagaha, and the man said, okay, gave him a set of directions, I'm paraphrasing here, but turn right, turn left, go straight, and you'll get to Rajagaha. And then afterwards, that man didn't follow the directions. And instead of going to Rajagaha, he, took a wrong turn. And the Buddha said, what would the man who gave directions be able to do about that? And the person said, nothing. That person's only pointing the way, as far as I remember. And the Buddha says, in the same way, Tathagatas only point the way. And it's up to people to follow the path themselves. So as far as changing the entire world goes, one of the best things that we can do is to change ourselves, because this changes our world, which is what we're truly concerned with. This changes our perception of the world and the way we experience it. But even on an outward level, one of the most convincing things that other people can see, one of the most convincing statements that a person can make is to change their own inner behavior. That's something that family members, that friends, that society at large can notice. So changing one's own mind is one of the best things that one can do for oneself, and also possibly one of the best things that one can do for others. By one's example, one is showing them the way to a higher type of happiness, one that doesn't depend on materialism. So then, is chanting a mantra a good method to calm the mind and help us to be mindful of the present moment? When I was first starting Buddhism, I actually started in the Korean Zen tradition, and they have a very strong tradition of kind of chanting. And so we would chant this kind of mantra over and over again to generate kind of calm. And then there was also sitting meditation. So a kind of mantra can be used to gain a kind of calm in the mind. Can help the mind to calm down, which is, probably one of the reasons why Buddhists all over the world do chanting. Probably more effective, though, and one doesn't have to choose either just between chanting or just between meditation, but more effective than outward chanting is possibly to have an inward mantra that one uses. As an example, reciting Bud on the in-breath and Do on the out-breath, trying to stop one's mind from going to outward things, having that mantra completely fill one's mind. Because outward chanting, like outward mantras, has more potential for distraction than sitting down or walking with an internal, mentally recited mantra. So both of those methods, I mean, chanting is definitely something that Buddhists all over the world do, and is for sure a good, a practice that brings a lot of benefits. But in terms of the emphasis that one wants to place, if one wants one's mind to calm down, if one wants to experience the types of happiness that come from inside, then the most effective way to do that, possibly if one wants to use a mantra, is to have this kind of inner mantra, to have this kind of mantra that one recites quietly, internally, usually in conjunction with the breath when one is doing meditation. Although one can use both, one doesn't have to choose.
Thank you, Bhante. I think that was an excellent reply to the two questions, and also it was an excellent sermon that you delivered earlier. We've come to the end of today's Dhamma sharing. Before it gets dark where you are, I think we might not be able to see you. Then we might not be able to see you in the next 10 minutes, so it's getting dark. So let's do the Anumodana to transfer the merits to the Devas and also to our departed beings. We have two senior monks who just passed away very recently, in the last couple of days. One is Venerable Professor Veragoda Pemaratana Mahatnaika Thera, and the other one is Sayadaw Nyanya Purnanika Mahatero, who's a Sangha Naika of Nepal. Both these members of the two members of the Sangha passed away very recently in the last couple of days. So I hope that we can transfer the merits to them so that they will, journey in samsara will be a short journey as well. Please, Bhante, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I know most of my chanting comes from the Thai tradition. So I'll do the chant that I'm familiar with, and may those venerables who passed away have a short journey in samsara, and may all the devas have the opportunity to anumodana for whatever merits we've accrued. May they gain happiness from that, and may all beings be happy. Yatha varivaha pura paripurente sakarang evamevaito dinang petanang upakapati ichitang patitang tumhang kipameva samichatu sabe parentu sankapa janto panaraso yatha manijotiraso yatha sabityo vivajantu sambarogo vinasatu Mate pavatwanterayo sukhidiga yuko pava abhivadanasi lisa nichang udhapachayino chattaro dhamma vadanti ayuvanno sukhang palang adasime akasime nyatimita sakachame petanang dakinang daja pube katang anusarang Nahirunang wasoko wa yawanya paridevana natang petana mataya ewang titantinya tayo ayanchako dakina dinna sankami supatitita digaratang hitaya satana so upakapati so nyati dhammo chayang nidasito petana puja chakata ulara Palancha bikunang anupadinang tumhehi punyang pasutang anapakanti pavatu samba mangalang rakantu samba devata samba buddha nupavena sadasoti pavantute pavatu samba mangalang rakantu samba devata samba dhamma nupavena sadasoti pavantute Pavatu samba mangalang rakantu samba devata samba sankha nupavena sadasoti pavantu te. So may all beings be happy.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you so much. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Bhante Joe Atulo for joining us this evening. Bhante, we really appreciate the time that you've taken to spare with us this evening. So, on behalf of the Committee of Management of the Krishna Vihara and also the members of the Mahasangha, thank you so much for being with us. And for
Pleasure to
our
join.
welcome, Bhante. Thank you so much. I hope we can meet again soon. I hope
Have a great night. Tarawan
you too.
Saranai.
Tunan Saranai, Bhante.